do it as well as they could have. That's the next job. So it says, well, actually, to counter this unconscious bias that is happening with the majority of the population, we can set this thing up called a Māori ward. And that means that you can have a ward that specifically Māori candidates can stand for, and one of those people will get elected, and you'll always have someone who is elected by Māori sitting at the table. And so that helps in one way.
Yep. And I want to pause and emphasise elected, because a lot of people don't know that, right?
That's right.
A lot of people think that Māori just get together and chuck someone in there.
Oh, John, you're good. Well,
yeah. This person is elected, so I just wanted to emphasise that.
So that's one reason why we need it, but also actually having a Māori voice at that table will mean we'll make better decisions, because the more diversity you have at a table, the better decision making there is. And I know that, and Māori aren't one person, like, you know, whoever's going to get elected will have different opinions from other Māori.
Yep.
You know? But
just like any individual.
Exactly. Yeah. But what I do know is that what's really important to Māori is whenua, you know, the land, and community, looking after each other. And so if people like that get elected to our council, then our council's going to make better decisions about how we look after our community, how we look after our land. So not just we'll make better decisions because there's a different voice, but we'll make better decisions because that voice will likely think land and community is important, you know, not necessarily, but possibly.
Yeah.
But also,
more than likely.
Yeah, I think, and then the other thing is... I mean,
there are Māori who exist, of course, that maybe don't prioritise those things, but getting elected without those values would be difficult. Yeah. Not impossible, but difficult. And
then the other part is that we're actually entered into a treaty in 1840 to say, actually, we're going to do this together. You know, we're going to do this thing together, and that hasn't happened. And so... I know this is not enough, but it's one way of saying, actually, we value that partnership and we want you at the table. And I know it's not enough, and I know it's, you know...
But it's a start, right?
At least it's something. It's start.
So there's people out there as well, and I'm not going to mention names, but I'm sure you know, that are disputing this whole partnership clause and saying that it's not a partnership.
Oh, and the treaty doesn't say, and we're going to go into equal partnership and do the thing with the thing, because that's not how it was written.
Yep.
But and I think the tricky bit about the treaty is that we've got three versions.
Yeah.
So it's really, you know, it's making our life very difficult because, you know, we've got the English version, we've got the Te Reo version, and then we've got the translation of the Te Reo version, and all three of them say different things.
Yeah.
But what my understanding is that the treaty was entered into for probably many reasons, but a couple of reasons. One was that the settlers that were here then, the white settlers that were here, were misbehaving, and Māori needed protection from them, so they said, we'll sign this treaty, but you've got to stop these guys from misbehaving. And we're happy for new settlers to come, but you've got to stop them from misbehaving as well. And we're happy for new settlers to come, and they can have some land, but we're going to choose which land they have, you know. And that, I know that's not what the treaty says, but I think that, you know, was one of the reasons why it was signed. And that's why, so my family came out on the first settler ship that came into Ngāmutu, and they only were able to get on that boat because the treaty had been signed, and there was an agreement that settlers could come and they would be able to have some land, but it would be land that was chosen for them by whoever the iwi or hapu or whoever it was that was in charge would, you know, say which land it was. So they were able to get on that boat to come out here because of that. But not long after getting here, everyone kind of pretended it didn't exist, and so they just got on with it. And it wasn't any of our fault. Like, it's not my fault.
Yep.
You know.
That's a big thing too, right? Like that's like a big thing that comes up is a lot of the descendants of, I don't want to say the misfits, but the descendants of the people that didn't adhere to the agreement, they feel like it's I don't know if they feel like it's their fault, they've been told it's their fault, but they keep on saying, it's not our fault, it's not my fault, why do I have to adhere? So I guess, since you've mentioned that, how do you feel about that kind of...
Well, we didn't, no. This generation didn't do it.
Yeah.
And the previous generation didn't do it.
Yeah.
It happened, and it wasn't, and it was the colonising was happening all over the world at the time, so it was normal behaviour for that time, and it wasn't good behaviour, and at the time people didn't realise it wasn't good behaviour, they just thought this is the way it should be. Now we know it's not good behaviour, so we can look back and go, well, that wasn't right, that wasn't done the way it was supposed to be done, and we've got a chance to fix it. We can't fix it, we've got a chance to change things. And so I think if we had really entered it into a treaty and there was a partnership and we had worked together to grow this nation, we wouldn't have the inequity between Māori and Pākehā that we have today. You know, if people who say, you know, this partnership stuff's a nonsense, then actually we should all be on the start line at the same place right now, shouldn't we? And we're not. So we haven't done the right thing. Because if we'd done the right thing, we came here, we were the visitors, Manahiri, we came here, we were welcomed, and then we're now at a position where there's a huge inequity between Māori and Pākehā, and education, poverty, employment, you know, everything. If we'd done it right, we'd all have the same opportunity.
Yeah. And so what do you say to, I guess, the people that say things like, I don't know how to word it, like, there's people out there that say things like, no, it's their choice to stay back on that line, like it's their choice to go to jail and all that sort of thing. Yeah,
and people sort of say that you know, I have heard you know, that sort of thing. Not quite it's their choice, but, you know, pull your socks up, you know, we've got New Zealand, you can do it, we can all do it. But it's that same thing. That would be absolutely perfectly fine if we're all starting on the same starting line. You know, and it's not actually, the poverty isn't just Māori, you know, that's Pākehā and poverty as well. But some people do not have enough food to feed their family every single week. And it's not like a small portion of the population, it's quite a big bit, and they've got to choose, do I pay the electricity bill or do I put some food on the table? And so how can those children that come out of that household where they don't know if they're eating today or they're eating a slice of white bread because that's the only thing we can afford, how can those people be as successful as a child that gets 3 meals a day and a warm house to live in and all the other bits and pieces that go with it? You know, if you get there, then you're like a superhero. You're like, you know, if you can stay equal with all of that disadvantage, then imagine what you would have been if you'd had the advantage.
Yeah, for sure. Crazy. So, I guess the practicality, or like, I guess let's talk about the pragmatic side of actually establishing a Māori ward. So there's a lot of misconceptions around how this will be done. So can you kind of give, I guess, an overview of, okay, the council have voted it in now, what can or what will kind of happen from here?
So on the 21st of July, the council voted to establish a Māori ward, so it's established. So we've got it. One of the bad parts of the law is that if 5% of the population say they disagree with the council's decision, then the council has to have a binding poll, and they've got to hear from the community about whether the Māori ward should go ahead or whether it shouldn't, and whatever the majority of people say in that decision, and that poll is what happens. So at the moment we have got a Māori ward, you know, that's all go. But we get 5% of the population, so it's the electoral population, so that's 2,890 people, something like that.
That's 5%, right?
Yeah. Say they don't want to, they don't think we should have a Māori ward, then the council has to have a binding referendum poll, and the community gets to vote about whether they want one or don't want one.
Yeah. So just to kind of, I guess, compact it down a bit. So we've got one's being voted in. 2,500-ish, we'll say 2,600, I think it's just under that. 2,600 people petition and say, no, we don't agree. If that happens, then it is put out to everyone who is enrolled on the electoral roll.
Yeah.
They can vote yes or no, whether a Māori ward should be established, and then that is the decision forever, or till the next election, or
for 6 years.
Okay.
So then in 6 years' time, 2 terms, and then they get to, the council get to talk about it again, and they can do the same thing.
So is this the 2 years since Andrew Judd's call, was it?
Yeah. So 6 years ago, when Andrew Judd was mayor, the council voted to establish a Māori ward.
Just right, it was like 5 to 6 or something like that.
Yeah, I think it might have gone on by 2.
Yep.
Yeah, but great, awesome. But then there was a petition. They got over the 5% referendum. Nobody understood the issue. Nobody really understood it. Not many people engaged, and then the no's won. So the council couldn't establish the ward.
Yeah.
So this time we're still at the beginning of the process. So I think we've got till either December or November for the petition to happen and to get the numbers. So it's quite a long period of time for not very many numbers. And so if that gets to that number, then we're back to the position where we've got to have a referendum.
Yeah, and the problem as well, because I know one of the big pieces of, I'm going to say propaganda, one of the big pieces of propaganda kind of going around is that the majority of the people didn't want it last time. But in actual fact, the majority of people didn't vote, did they?
So what happened last time, the no noise was very loud. Immediately, right off the bat, they knew it was going to be voted on. They were ready. They'd already got quite a few of their votes in advance of the decision, I think.
Yep.
And it was very noisy. That's all you heard was the negative. You didn't really get much of any positive stories about it. So people didn't really understand what it was all about. People didn't engage in it.
They still don't. Really.
For 6 years on, same thing again. Not many people have moved in their understanding. Yeah. Because for 6 years we should have actually been talking to the community and saying, actually, there's real.
One of the big things that I've recently discovered, and I find is pretty bullshit, and I might be wrong, but I haven't had anyone correct me yet, and I've put it out. I've asked people, is that the councillors themselves have not been given any sort of like a workshop or anything like that to detail how a Māori world would actually work and function and be applicable. Which, hey, you might say, well, it doesn't matter because they voted it and they want it to be there anyway. But when people are engaging them about, hey, tell me about it or why did you vote it, it feels like they're very ill-equipped to actually have the conversation as councillors.
They know it's the right thing, and I think a lot of people in town, in our community, know it's the right thing, but they don't know why it's the right thing. And I think it's tricky because every election you get new people in, and people have different things that are important to them. So obviously over the last 6 years that hasn't been important enough for people to think about. But it would have been really helpful if we'd had some education on what it means and what it does and how it works, so that when we had the conversation this time, we're a bit further ahead, we're further through the race, we're down the field a bit more. So we're still sort of starting just off the starting line with everybody's understanding of the issues. Yeah. But now this time people are willing to engage, whereas last time it was really scary. Andrew got his head chopped off, and so people are like, oh my god, dark. But this time people are like, actually it's the right thing to do. So we're going to engage and we're going to talk about it and we're going to do our very best. We don't really understand it still, but we know it's the right thing. Yep. And so I think we've got you and I, hips, we've got a couple of jobs to do. And one is trying to help people understand what it is, what the process is, and why it's a good thing to have, and helping people be brave enough to speak up and to engage.